Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm really excited to introduce my guest for today. I'm talking with Justin Crawmer. Justin is the founding partner of Webtek Interactive, an SEO and online marketing agency. He's an experienced, results focused marketing professional with particular specialization in the healthcare space, has a deep background in both online business and technical sciences. He's worked in-house for Skullcandy, CHG Healthcare Services, and has consulted with over 300 businesses worldwide. You can find out more about Justin and his team at webtek.co. We'll put links in the description as always. But today we are talking all things digital marketing, which is a common and familiar topic here at Private Practice Workshop and in our content. So I'm excited to have a guest relevant to that space. Justin, maybe fill people in a little bit more as to kind of how you got here and what else they should know about you. And then we'll get into talking about marketing as it relates to therapists.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me on, first of all. So my name is Justin Crawmer. I've been doing healthcare marketing, I would say, for, probably for at least 15 years, if not more, kind of depending on how you slice it. My original background in healthcare was I worked for a company called CHG Healthcare Staffing, which was, they were a staffing agency for healthcare, and we managed like 125 specialties, pretty much everything out there. So everything from therapist to nursing and physician and kind of everything in between. So through that background, I got a lot of experience with all different types of medical specialties and where to get, links from, just kind of how to speak to different audiences and things like that. From there, I left, and actually CHG was my first client as an agency. They when I went to leave there, just they wanted to keep me around. So they were my first consultant business client, and then from there, I've really grown into a lot of different medical specialties. Helping a lot of doctors get patients has been probably one of the biggest focuses. Spoken at a lot of conferences about that exact topic, and hopefully today we'll be talking a lot about
Yeah.
what people do along the patient's journey, and once they get to your website, how do you convert them into a patient in your
Yeah.
actual office. But I've also got a lot of other background in a lot of other things like medical, medical data, medical staffing, medical devices, all kinds of things like that. So
Excellent. Well, I think just jumping right in there and talking about, yeah, the healthcare side, they call them patients, we call them clients. There's a whole reason to that, but as therapists, we generally call them clients. Some call them patients. But in thinking about that client journey, and a lot of what we teach here is about digital marketing and how to get found by new clients. I would say for many practitioners, the biggest challenge to starting a new practice is getting clients, or in our case, getting clients consistently. Given that, depending on the type of therapy work you do, there is some natural attrition of clients. They could stay anywhere between 6 to 8 sessions or 6 to 8 years, and anywhere in between. But getting clients and then getting them consistently are kind of two different things. Um, Competing as a therapist online is becoming harder and harder, especially with the entry of big venture capital driven companies like BetterHelp and Talkspace and whatnot. So they're driving up the cost of paid advertising tremendously, like never before. In the experience of my practice right now, that means we're focusing more than ever on our organic search and getting better results that way. But yeah, take us through kind of where you start with folks, whether maybe you're starting a practice brand new, or maybe you're in a practice, you have an existing practice, but you're not getting clients consistently. The last thing I'll say before I hand it over to you here is, we've got a good handful of people here watching live, which is great. So if you have questions for Justin along the way, or about anything digital marketing related, please go ahead and throw those into the chat, and we'll pull them up one by one on the screen here. So yeah, Justin, I'll let you take it over here.
sure. Well, thank you. So when it comes to medical marketing, I think it's important to kind of understand the client's journey. Definitely, a lot of times what people actually start there's a lot of Google data behind this. We're Google partner agency, and we've kind of worked with some of their data, and as well as just a lot of experience with what we've seen in the industry. But I would just tell you kind of the overview, and we'll put a few links in here to some presentations that you guys can get some visual, but I know some people are just listening. So I'll try to make it so that it's as clear as possible. But I'll just give you the overview. When people start this kind of patient's journey, generally what they're doing is they're starting with a condition research. So they may not be starting out by looking for EMD therapy EMDR therapy or something very specific like that. They're maybe looking for depression or anxiety, PTSD, something like that, where they know it's some sort of a condition, or like they may be even more general, like I'm not like how to feel better or something like that. It's
Yeah.
very much talking about what is the condition research, and it's probably more general. I think that in this space, it's generally people know what depression is, whereas if you're dealing with dermatology, they may not know what it's eczema. They may just know it's itchy skin. But in this case, they're going to be starting with the condition research. And I mean, there are numbers around these in the medical space in general. And it's usually about 25% of medical searches start with a condition research. And so then what we do is we basically look at like, what is the, kind of in the SEO side of the world, you need to understand like, okay, so what is your goal? Your goal is to attract new patients. You really need to kind of understand what is the audience. So what are the different people and personas within that audience that maybe you might be trying to attract? And once you understand that audience, there's different personas. Maybe it's certain types of, I mean, you basically just kind of want to name who is your ideal client. You identify who those are. Then you kind of go back and you look into what is the keywords that they're going to be searching for. So you kind of go from the condition to treatments. Before I get too deep into any one of these things, then they will then be looking more specifically for the treatment facilities.
Yeah.
And then when they're looking at the facilities, they will come to making a facility decision. And these are all different kind of areas of content that you need to have available out there. Finally, they're going to book an appointment.
Okay, yeah, that's great. There's a lot to unpack here, and what I would say is that the therapists in our audience, some have zero experience with SEO and are just created a Squarespace site yesterday on their own. Some are running multi-million-dollar group practices with big marketing budgets, and everywhere in between. But this piece about keywords is interesting because there's a lot to be said about intent. For instance, someone that types in therapist near me versus a treatment such as what we do, EMDR, there's no way they would know about EMDR unless they've already done some research about it. It's a pretty niche treatment. It's generally used for primarily for trauma. So they probably have some trauma in their background. They've learned about EMDR, right? They're using the acronym and they're looking for, EMDR therapist, San Francisco. What we find is that leads that come from a keyword phrase like that are so much stronger than someone that was just typing in therapist San Francisco, right? So, what would you say about that piece in terms of intent, or for therapists that are starting to do some keyword research? Do you just go for higher intent keywords like that, or how do you think about that in terms of the strategy?
That's a really good point. That's one of the 4 factors we look at with keyword research is what we call consumer intent. There's other things that are metric driven. You want to look at estimated search volume. You want to look at competitiveness of the phrase and where you're currently ranking. But consumer intent is critical. I would say that when you think about it like this, it's kind of like what we call top of funnel versus kind of like lower in the funnel. Top of funnel is where they're just typing in therapy. They don't know what kind of therapy they want.
Right.
But that's an opportunity for you to educate them on EMDR. You're the one who can actually introduce them to that. So there is, importance on that. But I would say that the more important one is really targeting exactly your ideal client. That's why I was talking earlier about the personas and who is your ideal client. So you want to make sure that for your own specialization that you are dominant, but definitely don't need to shy away from the more general phrases. They're just 2 kind of different content approaches.
Let's walk through this scenario. And I'm being a little selfish here and asking questions for my own practice, but let's say we write a really great blog post talking about what is EMDR, or we had someone reach out recently and they said, can EMDR help with Lyme disease, right? Let's say we write a really good blog post for that, and then all of a sudden that blog post is at the top of page 1 on Google, ranking nationally. how helpful is that going to be in terms of landing us more clients for our local business, meaning people that are going to come to our office in San Francisco, or at least people that are, in California, and we can treat via virtual sessions.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of like telemedicine, or maybe that's not what they call it in the therapy space specifically. But yeah,
That's
I mean,
fine. Yeah.
that is one of the beautiful things about it. Is if somebody's looking for for a very specific type of treatment that you offer, and you are like a subject matter expert, you're able to win that patient these days, thankfully. But you're actually bringing up a really good point in terms of local people looking for you. We haven't really gotten into the Google My Business part of this just yet, but that's a
Yeah.
big part that we need to make sure we touch on, because
Okay.
the blog posts that we're talking about right now, where we introduce them to EMDR, generally those are not very good conversion
Right.
pages, right? Like those are informative pages.
Extremely low.
You
Yeah.
got to have like, the first thing that I would do is make sure that you have a really the ability for people to contact you. I mean, you're ultimately probably wanting them to just book an appointment, but kind of another conversion goal would be them just contacting you. And I would make it so they can contact you multiple ways. So like a suggestion would be to put in the header your phone number that's clickable, an email, ability to email you really easily by clicking it, as well as clicking on a call to action that will take them to a form that they could submit for you, as well as even just going ahead and just booking an appointment automated through that page. All of those really easily done would be important.
Mhm.
But I would also, sorry, yeah, go
Let's
ahead.
talk about that for a second. And we're going from top of funnel to very bottom of funnel, right? Getting someone on the phone, getting a lead, into communication with us. But there's certainly therapists that are wondering, what's the best call to action? Is it to email me? Is it to book a free consult on Calendly? Or some of us have an EHR that integrates directly into your site, so the person could book the free consult there or book the first appointment. Um, is there are there certain calls to action that you see converting better for kind of healthcare industry? Is it good to just have kind of those three you mentioned so that the person can kind of self-select?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would give them the options, because people are going to have different device types. People are going to have different,
Mm,
just, I don't know, personality types. Some people are way more like, I just want to call and talk to somebody and get something
right.
answered, and then I'll book it. Some people are like, I just want to show up on my appointment day. So when you look at your conversions, you want to think about the different personas, and it's not just the personas of like, oh, this is an older woman or whatever, in a certain income bracket. It's not just
Yeah.
demographics necessarily. It's what type of person. Some people are like skimmers, where they just want to read the headlines, and there's other people who are really detail oriented that want to get in. So you have to actually write content in a way that addresses both of those.
Yeah.
Actual conversion goals, the way that we work with any like medical therapist or
Mhm.
anybody whose goal is to get more patients, it's almost like lead generation and transactional meaning that it's, and then booking the appointment themselves, and it just appears in your calendar for you. That's the kind of I think the best case scenario in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
uh, People are going to want to just call you. Some people are going to want to like email you directly, and some people will use a form. I find that a lot of people these days don't really trust forms as much, because number one, there might be some
Yeah.
spamminess, and they don't know that the other person's receiving it as well.
100%. I think there's a lot of downsides to that, even though it is an option that we have. In my mind, if I'm running an errand, I want to finish that errand as fast as I can and know that I've finished it or I've completed something, right? So for me, some of the danger of filling out a contact form is I fill it out, I put my name, my email, my phone number, whatever, and then I send it, and now what?
Yep.
Sometimes there's lack of clarity as to what happens next. In our case, we at least indicate someone from our team will call you within one business day or whatever it is. So there needs to be something that happens next. Otherwise, a lot of consumers are out there and they're going to fill out five more contact forms and just hope that someone sticks,
And I would
right?
say that it's always a good general rule that whenever you get a contact from anybody, no matter what format it is, that you respond almost immediately, honestly, as
Right.
quick as you can. I mean, within an hour for sure. I mean, 24
Right.
hours is good, I guess, in certain industries too. But the sooner you get them back, because you're right, that's part of this journey, is that they're going to be contacting a few. And a lot of it just has to do with how quickly that appointment is set. So I
Yeah.
would say that form submissions, if you had to get rid of one of them, I would probably get rid of that. But I would tell you there's a nice a style that I would recommend, and I have it on what we we call the Webtek header at this point, because we recommend it for all of our clients, is a certain header that's like sticky. So that means that when you scroll
That's
down,
great.
everywhere you go, that header stays on the top. So no matter what page they're on, no matter where they scroll on the page, they're going to be able to click to call, click to email, and click to go to the form.
That's great. I just want to highlight that for a second. And for those who are here live on YouTube, you can go to webtek.co. That's webtek.co and see what Justin's talking about. It's a really nice header. And in fact, it stands out because you have this nice gold color for the call us or the get in touch by email, or you can go to request a quote and to fill out the contact form. And like Justin said, that feature travels with you wherever you are on the site. There's no doubt that people make a decision to reach out at any point in the site. They could be halfway down a page, they could be 3/4 of the way into a 3,000 word blog post or whatever it is, and we want to make it very easy for them to get started right whenever that decision process happens for them. We don't want them to have to go digging and digging and digging and then give up, right? There's a kind of a critical period there.
And I would also make it so that your book appointment is a high priority in terms of your actual, like what I've just mentioned as transactional, where they automatically engage with your website. I think that's a really good way to do it. Calendly is another good option. I mean, I know there's another program out there called Booksy where they can book an appointment and you can kind of put on your calendar, and there's also some accounting software built into it, which is nice.
That's great. We've already covered a lot in a short time, Justin. I'm wondering if you're okay with us pulling up a couple questions here from the audience.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Cool. All right, we'll pull up. See, these are some that have been submitted ahead of time. So here's a great question from a therapist named Robert. He says, how does a therapist make their website stand out from the crowd? Second question, how do you know which words boost search engine optimization? So maybe starting with that first question, if you don't mind, Justin, how does a therapist make their website stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of it in terms of the website, like standing out, I would say it's really just speak to who you are and what you specialize in is where I would really start. Like every therapist, whether, you're going to have your certain specializations and different kind of like, I don't know, like, what do you call it? Modalities or whatever that you specialize in.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what they're also looking for is the professionalism of your office space. So showing like what the office looks and feels like inside there, because that's kind of once they're making this facility decision, which I'll get to as we kind of go down that patient's journey a little deeper.
Sure.
That is part of the decision of what they decide. It's also things like reviews, like what people are saying. So you might want to integrate in like, there's just several different review softwares out there, but things like you can actually incorporate your Google reviews or even just testimonials that you're putting together. I think also using video is a good way for people to get to know you a little bit. You can put on a few, just kind of like, they don't have to be super duper professional. They could just be a way where people can get a feel for you talking as a therapist. I mean, just talking about one of your modalities on one of those pages, I think would be a good idea. Let's see, mobile friendliness and make sure that it's up to date and professional. I think there's still a lot of practices out there that have sites that are 5 years old or more. So just keeping them updated. I would say in terms of design, you want to be pretty clinical, honestly. I would say minimalist design. You want to go with like a lot of like white space, a lot of pretty pictures, a lot of like calming feel to it. I would really recommend you don't use like dark backgrounds and things like that in the special therapy space. You want to be conveying to them the feeling that they want to gain from your service.
Yeah, that's great.
I would say anything else in terms of what makes it stand out. Make sure it loads really fast. There's some other like technical performance things that I think would be important to make sure that you are taken care of. And just being able to convert and get done what you need to do. I think some websites really kind of miss on that too. You want to be really clear about, okay, what do I want them to do while they're on their website? So make sure that your flow of your website, what your content you're giving them, what navigation you're giving them, and where you're kind of ultimately trying to lead them in the website, make sure that's nice and clear. And you want to have, like, that's the kind of thing that you start from the very beginning of thinking, like I said from the beginning, what's my goal? Who am I talking to?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of times we forget that the primary purpose of the website is to get people off of the website and onto a call or a free consult or whatever it is.
Yep.
And once it's done that, it's kind of done its job. And many therapists are quite good once they get a potential client on the phone. Even therapists that are brand new to private practice, they're generally very good at the therapy part and forming a relationship and explaining how this works or how I can help. And so that's great when that whole process lines up. Um, there's also a lot to be said about having a brand that aligns with the type of client you want, um, and not all leads are created equal in that way. And so, in an ideal world, you have a brand and a message, really good copy that speaks to who you help and how you help them. If you are more niche, that are really um, branding around that niche, and then when consumers find your site, it's this light bulb moment of this is exactly who I am. I see myself in this website, in these photos, in this copy. This person totally gets me. They have a high degree of authority or expertise. I'm in the right place, right? And then I'm going to call. And in that case, the person is very likely to be pretty pre-sold when you have that level of specificity. It just so happens that Google likes specificity as well, especially if you're sitting in a very urban market like we are. Something as niche as EMDR both has very high intent, and also when our entire site is about EMDR, Google kind of appreciates and ultimately rewards that level of specificity. So there's a lot that needs to happen, and again, especially when you're in these bigger markets, you might have to work a bit harder or be more intentional with your niche than small town in Ohio.
Yeah. Well, for sure, it's going to be more competitive. And I think that you want to just make sure that when you're dealing with that niche, that you try to hit as many variations of the types of keywords that are going to be relevant to your ideal client.
Yeah, there's a lot of assuming people do with keywords that as therapists, we know how to describe what we do. For instance, a lot of therapists, they will put on their website individual therapy, as a keyword phrase, or relationship therapy, not knowing what consumers actually type, right? Or whether anyone types individual therapy. It might be the name of a class we took in graduate school, but assuming that consumers type it is potentially a dangerous assumption, right? So, um, yeah,
So that's a really good point. I would tell that I think there was a kind of follow up question
yeah,
about keyword research and how do you know what keywords boost search engine optimization is how it was asked. But I think what they're asking really is how do you know what are the right phrases to optimize it
mhm,
with, right? I'll give you a couple tools. I will tell you also
sure,
this is a pretty technical question, and as a
huge,
therapist,
yeah,
we may want to actually bring on somebody who has expertise in this. But I'll tell you that Google has a pretty good tool called Keyword Planner. So you can just Google Keyword Planner, and that'll be a really good place to start. You can actually start with if your website already has pretty decent content relevant to what your niche is, you could actually put your domain in there, like your URL, and it'll basically come back suggesting to you the types of phrases that you're currently relevant to and other phrases that are also relevant to that. So that is one of the tools that we use at Webtek. But there's anybody who's good at SEO. If I was as a therapist, I would go to an agency and just do a free consult is a good place to start, because that's something that most SEO agencies will kind of offer in the early stages of
yeah,
working with a potential client, is do the keyword research and kind of show them, hey, look, here's your opportunities, here's where you're currently ranking, here's where the estimated search volumes are on each of these phrases, here's how competitive it is, so how many index pages are in Google for that phrase, and also the idea, like we mentioned earlier, about the consumer intent, like how likely are they to be
yeah,
actually looking for what you offer. But I would think the one thing
yeah,
that I think is most useful, there are those four factors are all come into play, but I think probably the one single most useful thing, I mean, assuming you know your consumer intent, is the estimated search volume. Google will tell you, like, you just mentioned relationship therapy. My guess is it's probably something more like couples counseling or
yeah,
marriage counseling or marriage therapy,
mhm,
something like that. But Google's tool will actually give you a lot of good insight. Another thing that I would suggest you too, that if you've already got some search relevancy, you should, if you don't already have Google Analytics in place on your website, you should definitely set that up, as well as Google's what's called Search Console. These are two of Google's platforms that you can kind of use to directly communicate with Google, or at least get reports directly from Google. On the Search Console, there's something called impression data, which means that when you show up in the first page of Google, that doesn't mean you got traffic from that phrase, but it will show you what phrases that you appear for. And when you get an impression, sometimes you're surprised, like, oh, that's a variation of the phrase that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. Even with us, we have all the tools for keyword research and we have a really good handle on it. Even so, we will find phrases like that. Another suggestion I might throw out there is to run some pay-per-click campaigns as well. So
Yeah.
if you don't know about pay-per-click yet, it's basically just, I look at it like renting traffic as opposed to, building a home. Excuse me. When you're doing SEO, you're essentially building equity in your domain. So you're building up power and really creating value in your
Yeah.
domain in Google's eyes in terms of trust and how they're going to rank you. When you do pay-per-click, you don't have to spend the time to build that trust with Google. I mean, there's a lot of factors. I don't want to oversimplify it because you do have to. I don't want to get into technical details probably for this
Right.
purposes
Right.
today, but there are things you have to consider to make sure you are relevant with paid search. But paid search will allow you to pretty much get traffic immediately. So once you put money
Yeah.
in the machine, you start getting traffic, and therefore you start getting data around what phrases are actually converting for you.
Yeah.
And paid search does give you, I mean, Google has for years now has been really misty about the data that they will reveal on the organic side of things, but on the paid side of things, they give you a lot more insight as to
Yeah.
what keywords are converting, what campaigns, what ad groups, all those things will be reported to you. So I would actually mix your strategies a little bit if you have the budget, but organic is always going to be your better return on investment long term.
Yeah, and I mentioned this piece about cost per click going through the roof in the past couple of years, both because of COVID accelerating interest or mental health need, and also these companies that have massive budgets that has nothing to do with their ability to actually earn that money back or have ROI in
Market,
generating clients.
yeah.
That means for us or a small group practice like us, we still have to have some ROI on what we're spending. So again, in my case, in San Francisco, we were focusing more on winning organically than with paid ads. That being said, if you are charging enough, and if I had to start a practice or try to fill a practice in the next 30 days, I would probably start by having a really strong site or a separate landing page that I can run Google ads to try to control that cost, try to be very specific, niche around something like EMDR, something that's high intent, track that cost carefully and see, if I can get the number of clients I need from that.
That's
Even if the ROI is kind of delayed, like I mentioned, some clients, the risk is they could come for one session or not at all. They could also stay for a few years, and the ROI could be $150. It could be $4,000, right?
So that you're talking about lifetime value.
Yeah.
We talk about that all the time in terms of return on ad spend is a
Yeah.
metric we look at it with pay-per-click is what kind of return are you getting on your ad spend? Generally, we want to have at least be 2 times, if not like 4 times ROAS,
Yeah.
where every dollar you're putting in, you're getting $2 to $4 back, and you can track that through. That is one of the beautiful things about digital marketing, and organic does provide a ton of this as well. And
Right.
really, any channel organically, you can track so much data on everything that it's really good to be able to compare different channels to be able to see where you're getting a positive ROI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should talk for sure, just because you've mentioned organic play a couple of times, and when we're dealing with the situation with you having large competitors who are coming in with really just trying to gain market share and just they're like you said, they're not as profit driven as much as trying to grow something of value to probably sell it one day or whatever they do. It's what I would say is that, and I also see somebody here asking about $150 to $300 a month, so really low budget, and I'll kind of get maybe a little more specific on that.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for self-help options, generally an agency, you're not going to do too much with an agency for that kind of spend. But you can self-serve, I would say, probably the most efficiently on your Google My Business profile. So there's a whole algorithm to Google My Business, and just to make sure everybody knows what that is, it's like when you search any local business and you get that little, standard template kind of version of a business that has like pictures and hours of operation and reviews and all those kind of things. We actually have a handy guide that we give out to all our clients, but there are certain things you should do And that's, first of all, just make sure you've got everything completely like set up on that page as completely as possible. I mean, you want to put in as much data and information as you can on there, and that includes a lot of pictures. There's a place where you can do posts. So every time you do a blog post, and that's always something we recommend, is you actually cross post it to your Google My Business profile page. Also, asking for reviews is a really important part of the algorithm. So the more reviews and the better reviews you have, the better you're going to appear in search results. And also, probably, I mean, just as important, if not important, is actually the click through. So when you
Yeah.
have a lot of reviews, even if you get more visibility, like for whatever reason Google ranks you number one, but you've got somebody below you who's got 300 5-star reviews, or people are going to just naturally click listing number two, where
Right.
normally, if we weren't dealing with reviews, people tend to click number one. Like majority, like number one in Google is going to get like 24 to 30% of clicks, whereas in Google Maps, the kind of local box, it's going to have a lot to do with how many reviews you got. So there's things you can do on the review side of things. There actually is really great software out there these days that makes the kind of automated process, and we can maybe talk a little bit about that if you're interested.
Sure.
But
Sure.
another thing is just simply just putting a QR code on, pamphlets or business cards or whatever, when somebody had a good experience, to make sure to hand them a business card with a UPC, a QR code. And that's one of the many ways. But I would say we could get more into detail about it now, but I
Yeah.
also probably just more Googling, like, how can I optimize my own Google My Business listing? Will find a lot of good information for you. And we have some articles I can share with too.
Definitely. I have one clarification here real quick. Julia's asking, and I can answer this. She's asking, how do you ask for reviews being a clinician? What she means is, because of our our ethical boards, we are not allowed to solicit reviews from clients. Think about it, right? If you're seeing me as your therapist and it's like, hey, this is going pretty well, do you mind leaving me a review? They feel some pressure. There's a power dynamic here, and I'm also asking them to break their own confidentiality. This is just a real tricky thing we have in our industry that is different from other service-based businesses. Um, my best approach with that is we still promote that we have these listings as much as we can. So like in our email signatures saying, here's our Google My Business listing, here's our Yelp listing, things like that. Also, asking for, if there's colleagues in your area that are local, to leave your review. That's one small workaround we found, but it is really tricky for us because we need those reviews, and a real gold in marketing is social proof, right? People want to see that this is trustworthy, reputable business. But how do we do that, since we can't ask clients for reviews? And to be honest, they seldom leave reviews on their own, which is
Yeah.
understandable. So I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
other thoughts about that.
I would say, I know this is a little more delicate topic in this specific
Yeah.
space. A lot of times, the software that we recommend for clients that asks not for reviews but for feedback,
Mhm.
the way that it's worded, which actually sends, so what they typically do is they send to like a landing page, and they can fill out 1 through 5. And the way that it works actually to kind of help bring in more positive reviews is if people select 1 through 3, then it basically creates a direct communication with you and that person. Whereas if they filled out a 4 or 5, then it would take them through to Google. But the way that it's worded is a little more passive, where you're not saying, will you leave me a review? It's like, if you would like to leave feedback, you can go here. And then it's kind of like an intermittent step that
Yeah.
might be able to provide a little bit of safety for you guys.
Yeah.
But also, just leaving, like I said, a QR code, like a business card, right at the front desk, where if they had a great experience, they may feel compelled to grab one and go without you
Right.
actually asking for them. But it is a tricky subject, and you've got to be pretty careful.
Yeah.
So
No, that's helpful. Another one here on Google My Business, and this is a great topic because between you and me, Justin, meaning between you and me and everyone watching, Google My Business is kind of the low-hanging fruit and a real kind of untapped potential for a lot of practices. I will tell you a little experiment I did about a year ago. I created a niche site on EMDR in San Francisco and wanted to see how fast I could get it on page one. I also wanted to see how fast I could get the Google My Business listing to the you call it the 3-pack, right? The top 3 in the Google My Business search results. I was able to do it in a day, in part because I think the specificity of the site and the name, having a really good description, in the actual Google My Business listing. Another thing I use that I'm curious your thoughts on is I use a service called Bright Local and their citation builder. So what it did is I paid, I don't know, $75 and put in all my business information for this niche site, the office, the office address, the phone number, all that stuff, what the business is. And then they go out and they basically create, I don't know, it was either 25 or like 75 citations on listings that I've never heard of, right? My guess, or this is where I should let you take over, is like, what do you think that did, or how does that help a listing?
Yeah, so that's essentially what we call off-page SEO. It's you're totally
Mhm.
tapped into something that's really vital for local businesses, really all businesses, because Google sees all businesses as, if they're legit, they'll have a GMB, a local listing of where their
Mhm.
headquarters is based. But I would tell you this, that off-page SEO, so on-page SEO is all the things you do to your website. That means all your technical stuff, like your on-page, like your title tags, your meta descriptions, the copy, the
Yeah.
user experience, those kind of things on page. Off page means generating links to your website to kind of create votes or like credibility in Google's eyes from other websites. Citations are an important part of it, where they're not actually as much of a direct link, but they are mentioning what's called NAP, your name, address, phone number, and Google's looking for consistency out there. So the more that you have your name, address, and phone number listed across business directories consistently, that will, and then actually that does point links back to your website and back to your GMB page, and there's connections that you want to make between your website and your GMB listing. But that is for sure going to be a big piece of why you saw results, especially if none of your competitors are doing that already. That's kind of like a really easy secret to get citations. So yeah, for sure, that's a good strategy.
Cool. Um, a quick question we have here about my niche site that I mentioned. They're asking, do you mean a subdomain to your regular domain? No, this is a separate domain and really just an experiment to see if I make a site entirely about EMDR in San Francisco, how fast can I get it ranking? The downside is, right, starting a site completely brand new, you have zero domain authority. Google has no idea who you are or what you are if you belong here, and therefore you're generally not going to be deemed as trustworthy right off the bat, right? You have zero backlinks, zero content, etc. Again, I was just through this experiment able to get that Google My Business listing into the 3-pack in a day. But it was also just kind of crazy. Kind of an
How long ago?
experiment.
I'm just curious how long ago that was. Like what
That
year?
was maybe 6 or 7 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we just got one page up to the top, but I know there's also shifts and changes happening on the Google side as well
Yeah,
with
it's constantly
policies and
evolving. So things that
yeah,
were, even a year ago sometimes don't work as well these days.
yeah,
But I would say that, yeah, just wanted to see that question again. The
yeah. It's a
last
great
one, there
question.
was one question about the subdomain versus the niche site.
Yeah,
I
we
wanted
can
to
stick
address
on
that
that
really
one.
fast. So the way
Sure.
that Google looks at subdomains is actually separate, as a separate domain. So to clarify, if you are going to add on a niche section on your website, make sure that you do it as a folder within your root directory. So that means that you would be like mysite.com/specialty page, not specialty
Yeah.
page.mysite.com. It's very clear distinction that you have to make, that you put it in a folder. And I would say that there is kind of, there's a give and take. Like I think like John, you mentioned, like there is, you're building equity in a brand new niche domain. It's
Yeah.
very specific. You can get some domain keywords in there and things like that, which does help, but it's more your GMB that you got the quick results from. But
Correct.
if you have a let's say a multi-practitioner practice, or if you have multiple specialties, that you don't want to have a niche site for every one of them, because yes, you're going to have to build links to each of those different domains, and you're kind of diluting your overall link power by doing it that way. Again, you have less competition on the more niche you are, but
Yeah.
you can do it through a folder structure as well, where you are pointing a lot of power to the root domain, like the homepage of your website, as well as specific link building to subfolders. And that way you're
Okay.
actually harnessing the full link domain, the domain equity, and being able to also then niche out through a folder structure.
Let's go with that for a second. And let's say, again, I'm in San Francisco. We're eventually going to open a location in Oakland, for instance. For a new location, a new zip code, how would I go about strategizing that for my SEO? Is it a subdomain? Is it adding Oakland keywords on my San Francisco pages? Yeah, where do I start?
Well, um, your
Might be a
Google
can of
likes it
worms.
when you
So
have, yeah,
yeah,
Google, Google likes it when you have a real address at a
yeah,
location. So ideally, you would have a location for every city that you're trying to
yeah. Let's
target.
say I have one. Let's say I have a physical office there and a physical office here. But from a website perspective, I want this website now ranking in Oakland as well.
Yeah, I would create different geo-targeted pages. So you would basically have a different page for each one. I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, you could like list multiple addresses on one page at like a slash locations page, but we found it actually to work better if you're really trying to target San Francisco versus like whatever LA or I think you said Oakland. If you're trying to like separate them, I would have your own separate page. Like for example, Webtek. This is a digital marketing agency, but it's the same
Hmm.
thing. We have an Austin page for Austin office. We have a Salt Lake page for our Utah and Salt Lake geo target phrases. And a lot of times when we have, you know, we have a lot of different clients who like add locations, and over time we
Yeah.
basically just build out a GMB listing for them. We build out a localized page for them, and we kind of work that experience into the local page. And on the local page, we'll even talk about the city. You know, like we'll make the page so that
Hmm.
it kind of has a picture of the city. It has like I don't know, it may talk a little bit about some of the landmarks or just something that really makes it unique to that city. Not a ton of content around that kind of stuff, but enough to kind of make the two different pages uniquely different because of the only difference is an address and a phone number. That's the core of it, but it does help to have a little bit better copy around it too, just to kind of, fill in a little bit more copy.
Great. Excellent.
Google likes copy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Content is king. They've been saying forever. It's still true.
100%. Let's maybe we can wrap up our discussion on GMB here with this question. We've got this question kind of twice in two forms. The question is this is Andrew Connor asking any advice for folks that have 100% online practice, which is very common now in this post-COVID world, and are unable to get a GMB profile. Let's start with that question.
Well, the good news is, even though I just said that you have Google likes when you have a physical location, I would also use a virtual office address. That's where I would start. I would probably put it like if you're in, let's say, Salt Lake City, Utah, or something like that. You don't need to necessarily list your home address if you're working out of your home, but you could go get a virtual office, and that would be a good place to start where you can do a workaround for that city location. Because GMB
Yeah.
people just tend to trust those areas. For sure, if you cannot do a GMB, then you want to go with another, just basically an organic strategy trying to rank your website. And
Yeah.
people are looking for a virtual provider. I mean, having a good website that's got a good user experience and a professional image, those are the things that you definitely want to focus on. But I would say for sure, GMB or sorry, Google AdWords does work. We've seen good results on it. Sometimes the industry can be pretty expensive, but then you really think about the lifetime value, like John
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. You really want to calculate how many months of treatment do you typically see from a good quality
Yeah.
customer that comes in or client that comes in.
I had one of my consulting clients in this dilemma recently with not having a physical address. They were able to work around it by basically to verify your listing. Google needs to send you a postcard and that has a little code, and then
Yep.
put in the code and you're off and running. They were able to, and the fear for therapists is I don't want to have my home address and have clients start showing up at my home, especially the pissed off clients.
Yep.
Um, and so they were able to still send that postcard to their home address, activate the listing, but then to indicate on Google My Business that it is in fact a virtual business. I'm not exactly sure how they're able to do that, but again, it's a dilemma a lot of therapists are in now. And I think 100% we still need to find a way to have a Google My Business listing. Maybe you are subleasing an office. Maybe you have, I don't know, a registered agent for your LLC where you could send mail. I don't know what it is, but I really think therapists need to find a way to
Yeah.
get that listing active.
That's always our suggestion with any client who doesn't have a physical address or one that doesn't want to disclose it. That's what we always say is use a virtual address. But also don't forget that your website itself can be a powerful tool. I would say that generally you may not need to even rank for if you have a fully remote practice, you don't even necessarily have to go after geo-targeted phrases. The only reason why you'd really even need to do that is if somebody's looking for somebody local to even work with virtually. or if it's just like you find a specific geo target that's got a good, low competition that you think you can really compete there. But if you're virtual, I mean, generally people, they're not going to be looking for somebody in, Tennessee if they're looking
Yeah.
for a phrase like, like therapy near me or therapy Texas or something like
Right. Right. Great.
that. But
Um,
they would be looking for something like best EMDR provider, or
yeah.
and then they're
Which
looking.
is me, by the way, for anyone wondering. Um, we have another question here, and then I wanna also leave some time, Justin, for you to kind of wrap up with any, notes that you probably haven't gotten to. I know we've done a lot of questions, but I think it's been
Fine.
fun to
Yeah.
really just get to these. So let's see. Dustin asked, and he submitted this ahead of time. If I had an extra 150 to 300 a month to put toward marketing, what would you recommend other than Google Ads to get more discovery calls booked?
150 to 300. It's not a lot. I'll be honest with you, but I would say that probably, you could look at doing some like professional listings. I know there's a lot of different websites out there that you can like pay to have a directory listing, where you can, kind of do like a sponsored listing on some of those. I'm trying to think exactly what the names of them are right now, but there definitely are professional websites out there for people trying to help, like basically directories of practices. I would say also like content is another area that I would make sure that you
Yeah,
don't
that's where
have
my head
some
was
sort of
going.
like, blog content strategy or something. You can find good content writers who will provide for you. I mean, we generally charge 125 bucks per post, so that might be something that I would think if you get another post per
Yeah.
month. That way, you can actually cross post it from your blog to your social media, to your GMB listing, to an email newsletter audience. Like, you can actually use that content a lot of ways. Even emails can be good because it's like it just reminds them like you are the practice provider, because they may, let's be honest, they're probably talking to two or three practices at the same time, trying to find out who they want to work with. So that would be another area. You might want to also look at like, I don't really think social would be an area that I would spend too much
Right.
time on. Yeah, that'd probably be where I would start with that kind of budget.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, one piece that you mentioned earlier in the show that I would bring back up is video. This isn't necessarily something you need a monthly budget for, but if it was 300 bucks a month that you could put into 900 bucks for a really good videographer to come and get really good video and stills of your space,
Yeah,
your office, what it's like to see you, some B-roll footage, and then a really nicely done video of you talking about who you are and how you help.
yeah,
I think that could go a really long way.
yeah, that's a great
Um,
suggestion. I would totally do that.
yeah,
If you don't have that, and I love the idea of getting really good quality, because professionalism is kind of a big part of the decision making process.
yeah,
If you for some reason can't, pull that off, especially if you're just starting a new practice or whatever, iPhones or whatever, newer quality or newer phones these days
yeah,
have enough quality where you could at least capture the essence of who you are as a
yeah.
person, as a patient provider. So I would even start there and maybe, put that on YouTube and put it on a few places where you think your audience is going to catch it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of just getting started with video content. I agree. Taking your phone, if I had to do it, it's going to be, I'm going to find the brightest window I have in my office, hopefully, and I'm going to set my phone there and I'm going to talk right to the camera, the way I would with a client, or you would envision talking to a client about their pain points, or conveying that you get it. So I think you can do a lot there that's going to help you stand out from most therapists as it is. So I think that's a great place to
And
start.
another thing too
Yeah.
that helps, because I've done a lot of these too, and I don't like being on camera that much generally. I talk to my clients all
Well, this
day.
has been good exposure for you today then. Good exposure therapy for you, I
It's
should
too
say.
easy to talk on Zoom calls. This is normal, but like when a camera's in my face, sometimes it like makes me feel uncomfortable talking naturally. So
Yeah.
I would say, maybe come prepared with some questions. That really helps. Like, have the person ask you like, "What's your typical intake process look like?" Or what are the kind of, whatever the questions are that
That's
kind of
great.
jog your dialogue.
I'm gonna throw one more question at you. We've still got a bunch, but we've only got about 7 minutes. So, one kind of technical question here, and then Justin, I want to make sure you got time to
Mhm.
throw out anything else you want to, and also letting people know how to get in touch with you guys. Julie's saying, uh, it looks like you need to be using Google Ads to use Google Keyword Planner. Is there another tool for SEO?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I think there's a workaround with that. We can maybe have a
Yeah, I
discussion
think so too.
afterwards if you want to, like, I don't know, get in touch with me somehow. We can talk about some other like ways around that. But I would say there's a couple other really good ones out there. Ahrefs is one that we use commonly. SEM Rush is another one that a lot of people
Mhm.
use. There's something called SpyFu. You could even just Google, like keyword research tool and see what kind of free tools might come back to you. I really
Yeah,
am a fan of using Google as kind of the starting place. But there's another one too. Oh man, what's it called? It's I'll have to think of it. There's another
yeah,
tool, but yeah, Julia, if you can maybe reach out to me afterwards, I can connect you with
there
some
you
other.
go. Yeah, Uber Suggest,
There you go. That's the one. Yeah, I was trying to think.
there you go. Keywords Everywhere is another one I have, just
Uber
it's a
Suggest
browser
is really
plugin.
kind of easy for people who are not like
Mhm.
SEOs.
And I think you can set up a Google Ads account even if you don't put money into it and fund a campaign. I think it's
Yeah,
yeah, if you need to set up an account to use Keyword Planner, I definitely do it because it's still a free tool. Yeah.
yeah. And one more thing, also, that if you talk to us or another partner agency, Google partner agency, typically when you set up your first account, we can get you like $100 or $200 in free ad spend. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that we can hook you up with.
Yeah. That's great. Um, let's see. Yeah, we had a couple other points here about the GMB listing or getting that postcard. Um, Andrew had said, "Yeah, I've tried the postcard sent to my home address 3 or 4 times without success. So that's making me look pretty bad, but that's okay." Jazzy says you can use the mailbox address, like a PO box, physical address of post office indicating box number, or a UPS store address. So we got all sorts of ideas floating around here now.
Yeah, I would probably not use UPS store address myself personally because I think it's confusing when people are looking
Mhm.
for your business and they somehow show up at a UPS store. It might be confusing. But if you get a virtual address, then there's no other business at that spot.
What is a virtual address? We
So,
should.
oh yeah, that's like pretty much you pay some big office building downtown to have a like a mailbox in their thing. It's like a suite
Mm,
address.
okay, yeah,
It would be like for us, it's like 222 Main, which is a big office building, and we just have like suite number 2102 or something, and it's literally just a mailbox.
cool. That's a great workaround. It's something I hadn't heard of. So yeah, thank you for offering that.
Yeah.
And we've covered a lot of ground, and we've certainly put you to work here, Justin. So thank you for your your endurance here. An hour of questions, basically from therapists who really appreciate your help, myself included.
Yeah.
A few more minutes here. Just anything else you want to throw at us? Maybe something you hope that therapists remember from today along their marketing journey, and then from there, of course, how can people reach out to you and get in touch with you and your team?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've got some resources for you guys. I think there's too much to cover in the amount of time that we have left, but I would just kind of direct you to webtek.co. And then, I mean, there is a URL that I could send you to, probably just for the purpose of this. Go to webtek.co. You click on industries and then healthcare. So it's webtek.co/healthcare, I think is what it is. But on there, I have two different presentations. One's called The Patient's Journey, and it really walks you through, like I mentioned, the condition, where they start with condition research and kind of how to go through that process. Then once they get into the treatment options, like how to really address the people who are at that phase of the buying cycle. Treatment facilities, that's something we kind of covered here, about showing the treatment and just helping them decide which facility to choose, and then actually booking the appointment. After that, I've also got another presentation on there that talks about like why your website is not converting, and it really addresses all of the different components that your website needs to have as a medical practitioner to get more patients specifically. So there's a couple of great resources there. You can reach out to us through, like I said, webtek.co. I There's other ways of reaching me, but probably for this, that's the easiest place to start.
Yeah.
Definitely, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Justin Crawmer. I think that's on the show here. That's an easy way to reach me, also. Yeah, I think that's probably what I've got.
That's great. Justin, this has been super helpful. I mean, you've really given us a great level of depth with this stuff, which is so helpful. Thank you so much again for being here. And we'd love to have you back sometime,
Yeah, be happy
especially
to.
with all these
Yeah,
questions.
we could
Yeah.
we could go deep on any one of these topics.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think next time that might be the thing to do.
But yeah, if there's any other
Yeah,
questions that did not get answered, I mean, I don't know, John, if you want to maybe email them to me or anything like that. I'm happy to spend a
sure,
little more time getting people's questions answered who couldn't
sure.
come today.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. We can again also just have you back. I think that's a natural way to keep the
Happy to do that.
conversation going.
Happy to do that.
Excellent. As always, folks, so we're on our weekly regimen here where the show is live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and whatever that is in between for you. Um, I've never known the time zone for Texas, for instance, and apparently I never will at this point. But we'll be back next week with another guest, and really looking forward to it. So again, Justin, thanks for being here. It was great to connect with you, and yeah, we'll see you again real soon.
Great. Thanks, John. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.
Cheers.